So welcome all to LaGrasse Center's new series on the luminous path of sacrifice. Over the course of the next 7 Saturdays, the concept of sacrifice will be examined from various vantage points, which will include an historical, philosophical, psychological, cultural, and even scientific perspective. So we are very honored to have experts joining us in each area as presenters, and they include Selby B.B. Lawson, who is with us today on the panel and will be speaking next week, Manoj Pavitra, Dipti Raha, let me see if I can say that right, Rajavendra, sorry Dipti if I got that wrong, Alok Pandey, Marco Macy, Devashish Banerjee, and of course today Vladimir Yatsenko will be speaking. In Synthesis of Yoga, Sri Aurobindo describes the essence and nature of sacrifice as, quote, the true essence of sacrifice is not self-immolation, it is self-giving. It is not self-effacement, but self-fulfillment. Its method not of self-mortification, but a greater life. Not self-mutilation, but a transformation of our human parts into divine members. Not self-torture, but a passage from a lesser satisfaction to a greater ananda. Further on, Sri Aurobindo continues, our sacrifice is not a giving without any return or any fruitful acceptance from the other side. It is an interchange between the embodied soul and conscious nature in us and the eternal spirit. And even though no return is demanded, yet there is the knowledge deep within us that a marvelous return is inevitable. The soul knows that it does not give itself to God in vain. Indeed, claiming nothing, it yet receives the infinite riches of the divine power and presence. So sacrifice is a self-giving, it is self-fulfillment, it leads to a greater life and a passage from lesser satisfaction to a greater ananda. And so introducing today our new perspective series on this topic is Dr. Vladimir Yatsenko, who will explore the evolution of the concept of sacrifice from the Veda to integral yoga. Vladimir is the director of the Institute for Applied Research and Integral Studies here at the LaGrasse Center in Fountain Inn, and he holds a master's degree in linguistics and in Sanskrit language and literature, and a PhD in Indian philosophy. As most of you know, Vladimir instructs many courses here at LaGrasse, including study groups, and this includes Sanskrit, the Upanishads, and the Rig Veda. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Vladimir. And as you know, please do put any Q&A in the box, and we'll get to it at the end. Thank you. Vladimir?
Thank you, Radhe. This is our first session today, and we are opening with the historical overview of the development of the concept of the sacrifice. And let me project the slides. They will help us to do this better. So the idea of the sacrifice is actually a central idea of the whole Indian tradition. And if we look at the whole paradigm shift which took place over the last at least 8,000 years at least, then we will see that this first idea of the sacrifice was introduced, as we know it, in the Rig Veda Samhita, who is the oldest, at least 6,000 BC, according to Tilak, and Sri Aurobindo also supports the same idea, that the text is very ancient. So the sacrifice is viewed as the ongoing process of the development or changes in time. So, and it is viewed in a very interesting manner as Dvipad and Chatushpad. I want to start with this simple idea. So, Sham Yoh Dvipade Chatushpade. We find these mantras in the Rig Veda very often. speaking of the sacrifice. So it is usually interpreted as be merciful or be beneficial for Dvipad and Chatushpad as to human beings and animals. But Sri Aurobindo gives totally different view on this, and he says that Dvipad is related to our internal being, that means our Antaryamin, Antaratman, and Jivatma. Jivatma and Antaratma, their connection, creates this Dvipad idea. So to say, the quintessential presentation of human being. And Chatushpad is 4 levels of the development, from the physical to vital, from the vital to mental, and beyond. And this is Chatushpad. So the development of the instruments of nature. And so this development of nature is one part of the sacrifice, and the other part is the growth of the involved consciousness in us as a spark of the divine, or the divine presence in us, the soul, the psychic being. So these two simultaneous developments, developmental lines, are going on in the evolution of consciousness and being. In this way, Agni is also approached in the Veda as the flame, or the aspiration, or the divine presence in nature, as Yajatra, worthy of sacrifice, that power which pushes the whole nature forward in its development, survival of the fittest, according to Darwinism. And from the other side, the development of the soul and the growth of consciousness in our psychic being. So both developments are taking place, and Agni is then referred to as Priya, as beloved one, or as Idya, the one to be sought with adoration. So these two simultaneous developments are the basis of sacrifice. So sacrifice means literally the development or the growth of consciousness in nature, making nature more sacred by the presence of the spirit in it, or the growth of the spirit in it. And it can be achieved by 2 different approaches. One is by the concentration of will and power within the nature, and that's what we call asceticism. That is the ancient way of offering our nature for its betterment. And the other is the surrender of our soul to the divine, which is more direct from the heart. So the idea is of the development of 2 parallel directions of development of our instruments of knowledge and our consciousness within. So how it was achieved, it is quite interesting. If you look at this word yajna, sacrifice, it is found in every hymn of the Rig Veda. Agnimile, I seek the divine flame with adoration. Purohitam, Yajnasya Devam Ritvijam, Yajnasya Devam, the god of the sacrifice. So we are looking for this constant interaction with the divine within our framework of life. So the whole nature was seen as the spiritual enterprise, as the spiritual ongoing change in time. And it had to be maintained, and it had its futuristic aim of the constant growth of consciousness till the divine is reached and divine life is realized. And that was known to us as immortality. Immortality was the aim of the Vedic sacrifice. The Vedic rishis who brought this knowledge are seen not as aspirants, rather than inspirants. They brought inspiration, they brought the higher knowledge into our midst for humanity. They are not evolutionary beings, but involutionary beings, as Mother says. They bring the higher consciousness down to us for the transformation of our nature through the process they called yajna, the sacrifice. Sri Aurobindo refers to the Veda constantly, and he says that the man is a transitional being. The Veda says very similarly that the man is the ever-advancing pilgrim, constantly on his way for betterment and growth of consciousness. So the sacrifice was envisioned as a constant transformation of our earthly nature and its forces, called gods, the forces of the spirit, who were invoked and brought down into the body. And it was seen as the path, the journey, the battle with opposing forces who tried to oppose us in our advancement. What are these forces? Forces of darkness. It is those forces which do not have fully awareness of the divine and established some kind of partial activities or equilibriums. They manifested themselves in a particular semi-conscious way, and they want to endure. So the forces of mortality. Abhishyama pritsutir martiyanam, exclaims the Rishi, saying that may we withstand the oppression of mortals. Immortality meets mortality. We as immortal beings, as sparks of the divine, meet the mortality, something which is to be framed, transformed, changed by our presence and growth. And that is seen as the sacrifice. Now, we need the gods as universal forces whom we always invoke and bring down for this work to help us in this evolutionary journey. So human beings are seen as evolutionary beings. They are the souls, the psychic beings in the language of the integral yoga. They evolve, change, progress in time. The concept of evolution of consciousness is fundamental contribution of the Veda. By the way, this evolution of consciousness we do not find later in the post-Vedic literature. It's more static, Advaitic. We find it only in the Veda and in the integral yoga. This growth, constant growth of consciousness is the sacrifice. It is only in the Rig Veda that the rishis speak of the descent of the higher consciousness. The gods are invited to come down into our lower hemisphere of mind, life, and body. And through us, they to rise to the supreme throne, as the Veda says, from which they can behold both realms of deity and aditi, of the finite and the infinite consciousness. And this is something very unique for the Veda and integral yoga. We have to arrive at new consciousness which will permit us to deal with both realms, both hemispheres simultaneously of our involved, living in time and space hemisphere and in our uninvolved, transcendental hemisphere of our unborn self. So if we have the perception of both, as Isha Upanishad would say, vidyam cha vidyam che astad vedo bhayam saha, the one who knows vidya and avidya together, he indeed has the consciousness of the Supreme. So the whole idea is to arrive at this new consciousness, which will give us the perception of vidya, the knowledge, and avidya, ignorance, or the partial knowledge in time and space. So if we look at the sacrifice from the point of view of the spirit, it is a constant conquest of nature. So we intrude into the nature, into the in conscience first, then into the ignorance, and slowly we build awareness within the instruments of nature. If we look at it from the point of nature, it is a constant offering to the spirit of all we are and do. The inbringing of the higher powers of consciousness into the lower being is considered to be a great sacrifice for them. And vice versa, the transformation of our natural way of being is also considered to be a big shift. So we have to leave something behind and become something new. We are constantly disturbing the equilibrium by spiritual interference. It is the very law of our existence in time and space to constantly become, progress, evolve towards higher and higher capacity of consciousness and our bodies. So it's quite interesting that it is inbuilt, and that flame in nature, that fire, is pushing the development forward from the part of nature. Tapasya, tapas, the energy which is burning within and constantly changing everything. This is the power of the eater of food and food, which is constantly ongoing. And on the other side, there is a flame within the heart, the spark of the divine, which is also growing and becoming a flame, become individualized being, which can come to the front and take charge of the outer nature. So this is the process of sacrifice which was seen in the Veda. Yajna itself is a very interesting word if we examine it linguistically. It is from root yaj. The etymologists in Yaska's Niruktam speak about this interestingly, about Agni, as if Agni is from root aj or even ij. And ij is the weak form of root yaj. So most probably root aj and ij are kindred to word Agni itself. Agrenayati iti Agnihi. Yaska says that Agni is the one who leads forward, the leader forward. And Aja, the Vahana of Agni, who is a goat, is actually also translated as the driver forward, because he is from root Aj, to drive forward. And Ij is a weak form of Aj, from which yajna is produced, is also something like an energy which is driving the whole world forward in its development and evolution. Constant transformation in time and space. I will come to this Vedic sacrifice and its elements. This is the quotation from Sri Aurobindo. I will read only one part from here. Yajna is works, external or internal, either. The Yajamana must be the soul or the personality. Yajamana is the one who does the sacrifice, or the doer, as the doer. But there are also the officiating priests, Hota, Ritvich, Purohita, Brahma, Adhvari, etc. What was their part in the symbolism? Who are these priests? For if we once suppose a symbolic sense of the sacrifice, we must suppose also a symbolic value for each feature of the ceremony. I found that the gods were continually spoken of as priests of the offering, and in many passages it was undisguisedly a non-human power or energy which presided over the sacrifice. Actually, the first line of the Rig Veda, Agnimile Purohitam Yajnasya Devam Ritvijam Hotaram Ratnadhatamam, puts all the priests as the names of Agni. Agni himself is Hotar, he is Ritvig, he is Purohita, he is Ratnadhatama. He is all the major officiating priests. He does all the work. So these are the names or the activities of the divine which are taking place during the process of the sacrifice. Here is very interesting, kind of from the notes of Sri Aurobindo. I selected some of his passages about the gods and what they are doing and why they are here. And maybe I will kind of skip this for now, but read only one passage. This is the process of yajna, called often yoga, when applied exclusively to the subjective movements, and advara, when applied to the objective. Advara is the journey of our bodies. Our bodies are evolving, changing, becoming more and more capable of receiving the spirit. That is advaram, and yajna in the internal sense is yoga, connecting, constantly reconnecting with the spirit and making this connection more and more efficient, more and more vivid and present. And this is ongoing sacrifice. I wanted to, for the Vedic part, which is the most ancient, to finish with this overview of Sri Aurobindo of the Rig Veda, which is giving us the most psychological insight into the ongoing process of the sacrifice. Sacrifice as the ascension of the spirit to the highest top of its possibilities from within the nature. That ascension has already been effected by the ancients, says Sri Aurobindo. The human forefathers and the spirits of these great ancestors still assist their offspring. They are still there to assist us. For the new dawns repeat the old and lean forward in light to join the dawns of the future. Kanva, Kutsa, Atri, Kakshivan, Gotama, Shunakshepa, these are famous names of the rishis, have become types of certain spiritual victories, which tend to be constantly repeated in the experience of humanity. The seven sages, the Angirasas, are waiting still and always ready to chant the word, to rend the cavern of the inconscience, to find the lost herds of the light within the darkness, to recover the hidden sun. Thus the soul is a battlefield, full of helpers and hurters, friends and enemies. All this lives, teems, is personal, is conscious, is active. We create for ourselves by the sacrifice and by the word shining seers, heroes to fight for us, children of our works. These are all the terms used in the Veda. Shining seers, heroes, viravattama, the children of our works. Yeah? Children of our works are those which we create by the sacrifice, and they will help us in our journey forward. The rishis and the gods find for us our luminous herds. Those rishis, our forefathers, are there to assist us. The ribhus fashion by the mind the chariots of the gods, and their horses and their shining weapons. Our life is a horse that neighing and galloping bears us onwards and upwards. Its forces are swift-hoofed steeds. The liberated powers of the mind are wide-winging birds. The mental being of this soul is the upsoaring swan and falcon. that breaks out from the 100 iron walls and wrests from the jealous guardians of felicity the wine of the Soma. Every shining Godward thought that arises from the secret abysses of the heart is the priest and the creator, and chants a divine hymn of luminous realization and puissant fulfillment. These are the priests. We seek for the shining gold of the truth. We lust after the heavenly treasures. This is how the Vedic rishis use these terms. The gold, the treasures, are the treasures of the truth. The soul of man is the world full of beings, a kingdom in which armies clash to help or hinder the supreme conquest, a house where the gods are the guests, and which the demons strive to possess. The fullness of its energies and wideness of its being make a seat of sacrifice spread, arranged and purified for a celestial session. Such are some of the principal images of the Veda, and a very brief and insufficient outline of the teachings of the forefathers. So understood, the Rig Veda ceases to be an obscure, confused and barbarous hymnal. It becomes the high, aspiring song of humanity. Its chants are episodes of the lyrical epic of the soul in its immortal ascension. This, at least. What more there may be in the Veda of ancient science, lost knowledge, old psychophysical tradition, remains yet to be discovered. This is taken from the Secret of the Veda. So this was the vision of the Veda that the universal forces, higher forces, whom we call gods, are invoked by our flame within to come down. Agni actually commands them as the divine will. Sri Aurobindo says Agni is the symbol of the divine will in nature, who commands the gods, higher powers, to come down and to act here within the nature. Here, this is the explanation of this, what I just mentioned. The 33 great gods belong to the higher worlds, but rest in Svar, above in the overmind, and work at once in all the strata of consciousness, for the world is always one in its complexity. They are masters of the mental functions, masters also of the vital and material. Agni, for instance, governs the action of the fiery elements in nature and in man, but is also the vehicle of pure tapas, tuvis, or divine force. They are therefore mankind's greatest helpers. But in order that they may help, it is necessary to reinforce them in these lower worlds, which are not their own, by self-surrender, by sacrifice, by a share in all man's actions, strength, being, and bliss, and by this mutual help, man's being, physical, vital, mental, spiritual, is kept in a state of perfect and ever-increasing force, energy, and joy favorable to the development of immortality. So this is the vision of the Veda, which then was inherited by the Upanishads. First, I have to say that this vision was taken by Brahmanas and was put into the external rituals, which built actually all those Vedis, all those altars, and constant ongoing offerings, sacrifices, rituals, which built cults and culture. Actually, external culture is built on these cults, on repetition in a particular time, offerings to particular deities in a particular form and order. It built the culture which we know as Hinduism. Yeah? So Brahmanas are responsible of building this externally, repeating the mantras which were for internal use and internal sacrifice of the Samhitas. They build it outside. Then there was a long period, the gap between the two, and the knowledge was lost and revived by Upanishads, but in a new fashion, in the fashion which is more applicable to the individual perception of the truth. That means the gods started to be seen as the faculties of consciousness, as indriyas, senses. So here what Sri Aurobindo says about this. The gods of the Upanishads have been supposed to be a figure for the senses, for our seeing, hearing, speaking, thinking. So we moved away from Indra as the lord of the intuition and Svar towards the mind and mental faculty and so on. Seeing, hearing, speaking, thinking, feeling, and being in the body, these are the 6 major faculties mentioned in the Upanishads. But also, although they act in the senses, they are much more than that. They are represented in the senses, but they are not senses themselves. They represent the divine power in its great and fundamental cosmic functionings, whether in man or in mind and life and matter in general, not only in man, but in the whole nature they are present. That's why we all have the eyes to see. Not only human beings have eyes to see. All the animals, fish, birds, insects, they all developed eyes to see, because this faculty of consciousness is present in nature. They are not the functionings themselves, but something of the divine which is essential to their operation, and its immediate possessor and cause. So when we speak about seeing, hearing, speaking, thinking, breathing, and being in the body, we mean exactly those faculties of the divine which are standing behind and are immediate possessors and cause of these functionalities. This is how Upanishads are dealing now with our reality. So they are changing, the paradigm shift takes place, but they speak about the same sacrifice, same increase of the capacity of these faculties by the divine presence and growth in them. It's interesting how the Aitareya Upanishad presents the whole creation as the sacrifice of Purusha, who was created for the purpose of charging the manifestation with these very faculties. I will not go through the whole text because I want to save some time for the question and answer session, but I will take only the second half. In the first half, he created the habitat, the upper ocean, the lower ocean, the space in between, and the earth, the material creation, and the heaven, which is holding this gap within. So heaven and earth got split. In the second stage, he did something interesting. He thought, Saikshata imenu lokaha, these are the worlds. Lokapalanus rajaiti. May I create the dwellers within the worlds. Sodbhyeva purusham samudhritya murchet. And he heated up these waters of the lower ocean and pulled out of them Purusha. He formed the Purusha. Then Atman, the self, he heated up the Purusha by concentrating on him his conscious energy. Tamabhyatapat. Tasyabhitaptasya mukham nirabhidhyatayatham. And him being heated up, the mouth broke forth like egg cracks. Mukhadva kvachognih. From his mouth the speech came out, the word. Vachognih, and from his word the Agni was born, the flame. That's why the word is the Logos, the creator, the will, because he was born first with the flame. Nasike nirabhidyatam, his nostrils broke forth. Nasikabhyam prana, prana vayu. From nostrils the prana, the breath, life energy. From life energy, vayu, the wind. Akshini nirabhidyatam, akshibhyam chakshuch chakshusha aditya. His eyes broke forth, from his eyes seeing. From the seeing the sun, the light was born. Karnau nirabhidyatam, his ears broke forth, karnabhyam shrotrad. From his ears the hearing came into being, and from his hearing the space came into existence. Now we see that space came because he wanted to hear, the light came because he wanted to see, the seeing was the cause of the light. And those indriyas, or those senses, the cause is him seeing, him hearing is the cause of the whole space. So all these devatas, they're called devatas, the faculties of consciousness, then in the second half plunged into the inconscient ocean. They were projected into the inconscience. And from there, they cried out, give us the space in which we can dwell and the food of which we can partake. So he created for them first the horse, then the cow, and they said it's well done, but it's not good enough for us. And then he brought to them Purusha, the man, the evolutionary growth of instruments, and they said, this is perfectly done. And he said, enter them as your habitat. And they, one by one, they entered in the same order. Agni entered the word and entered his mouth. Yes, the vayu, the wind, entered the breath and entered his nostrils. The aditya, the light, entered his sight and entered his eyes. And the space entered his hearing and entered his ears. So the whole world now was reassembled within the human individual formation. First there was universal Purusha, now he is reassembled in the individual formation. And this is the beginning of the journey of this individual form, achieving more and more capacity, getting more and more capacity from the universal support of the Purusha. This is, you see, totally a new language is being used by the Upanishads to describe the process of the sacrifice. And if we move further to the Gita, and that is the next stage in this scheme, we see that we come to the Gita 500 BC, and then Tantra 500 AD, and then Bhakti movement, and finally integral yoga. We will see that the same paradigm of the sacrifice, a constant charging of our instruments by the spirit, will be maintained in different languages. So now I'm coming to the Gita, and Gita does it in her own way, very interestingly. At Sri Aurobindo's quotation, we find in the Gita the word yajna, sacrifice, and even jnana yajna, sacrifice by knowledge, as svadhyaya, which I didn't address in my presentation, used in the symbolic sense for all action, whether internal or external, that is consecrated to the gods or to the Supreme. So the action has to be consecrated. It's quite interesting how Krishna himself says this to Arjuna. Imam vivasvate yogam proktavana hamavyayam. I spoke this, I revealed this yoga, ancient yoga, to Vivasvat, to the Lord of the Sun, from the beginning of time. Vivasvan manave praha, and Vivasvat spoke about this to Manu. Manur ikshvakave bravit, and Manu revealed this to Ikshvaku, the first king of the solar dynasty. Evam parampara praptam imam rajarshayo viduch, and thus this tradition continued from king to king, from Rajarishi to Rajarishi, sakalene hamahata, and with long time, yogo nashtaf parantapa, this yoga was lost. Saivaya maya tedia yogach proktach puratanach, and now I reveal this yoga ancient to you. Bhakto sime, because you are my bhakta, sakha cheti, and my friend. Rahasyam hietat uttamam, this highest secret of karma yoga, of the sacrifice in the action, dedicating every action to the Supreme, I reveal to you, O Arjuna, because you are my beloved. So this is a new treatment of the sacrifice as the ancient yoga, but in a new form of karma yoga. I don't go into karma yoga in my presentation due to the lack of time, because I'm covering such big portions of Indian tradition in the light of the sacrifice. But I want to read these three passages from Sri Aurobindo, what he says karma yoga is. To do works in a close union and deep communion with the divine in us, the universal around us, and the transcendent above us. Not to be shut up any longer in the imprisonment and separative human mind, the slave of its ignorant dictates and narrow suggestions. This is karma yoga. To work in obedience to a divine command, an eternal will, a transcendent and universal impulsion, not to run under the whips of ego, and need and passion and desire, and not to be goaded by the pricks of mental and vital and physical preference, but to be moved by God only, by the highest truth only. This is karma yoga. To live and act no longer in human ignorance, but in divine knowledge, conscient of individual nature and universal forces, and responsive to a transcendent governance. This is karma yoga. To live, be, and act in a divine, illimitable and luminous universal consciousness, open to that which is more than universal. No longer to grope and stumble in the old narrowness and darkness. This is karma yoga. This is Sri Aurobindo's interpretation of karma yoga. Thank you so much. So nice with lemon water. This is an amazing shift over time of the same vision, concept of constant growth of consciousness in the body and evolution of the instruments of knowledge, which is seen in three major systems of knowledge. Veda, Upanishads, Gita. There is also Tantra, which I may not cover today. There is also Bhakti movement, which is very interesting because it is inter-religious movement. And finally, there is integral yoga. which I think combines all of these findings and languages and evolves and develops its own language. I think I will stop here because there are many more things which I cannot cover due to the lack of time. But if there are questions or insights, please let us share and discuss them together.
Thank you, Vladimir. And for the attendees, people participating here, if you've got any questions or, as importantly, any comments, I know some of you are joining who are in Vladimir's Hymns to the Mystic Fire study group. So please do feel free to add to his comments. And of course, we've also got Selby joining us. Selby, is there any comments or questions that you'd like to make? And if so, then just show your video. There we go.
Yeah, I just wanted to make two very brief comments. The first is thank you, Vladimir, of course, for that beautiful overview that's filling in many gaps for me. Also, thank you for Sri Aurobindo's words about the Veda, the high and aspiring hymnal of humanity. Since I study the Veda, I'm going to keep that as a little catchphrase for myself. And also, I want to tell you that I'm going to pick up the baton from you next week with the etymology of Agni. And so it was just a beautiful setup for what I'm going to talk about next week, and I look forward to that very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Selby. Yeah, just following up on Selby's comment, the passages that you shared from the Rig Veda were absolutely beautiful. And Sri Aurobindo's comments and his indication of what a lot of the Godheads represent symbolically and psychologically were, as you know, and are so critical to the Rig Veda, because without Sri Aurobindo, without the secret of the Vedas, the Rig Veda, the truth in the Rig Veda, the knowledge of the Rig Veda would be lost, perhaps forever. So just great gratitude for also mentioning that to folks. And if you haven't read it, certainly a wonderful place to start with the Rig Veda. I had a question for you, Vladimir, which is really going back to the Brahmanic period, which I know you kind of skipped over a little bit, but it seemed to me an important connection and transition from the Rig Vedic period. You said that the Vedas were the internal sacrifice, and that was very dependent on the gods. As we went into the Brahmanic period, this now becomes, as you say, the external sacrifice. It seems to me that external, that period, although perhaps not as much appreciated as many of the others, played a critical role in this evolution, in that this externalization, this ability for the body, the mind, the vital to participate and to codify externally, if you will, the truth of the Rig Veda was very important part of keeping that knowledge available, if you will, of preserving that knowledge. In fact, perhaps it could also be said that it was karma yoga, the first of the karma yoga, actually consecrating all of our outer actions to the gods. I'm wondering if you can just mention a little bit about what was happening in that transition and what you see as the importance of the Brahmanic period.
Thank you for this comment. Yes, you're right. It was a creation of the specific culture, and according to Sri Aurobindo, Brahmanic period started with forgetfulness of the real, true meaning of the Veda, and it wanted to recapture and continue to hold on to it over time. Yes, the whole tradition was continuing. Gurukulas repeating, studying by heart. Even now in India, many Gurukulas learning by heart the Vedas and continue to pass that. This tradition cannot be easily stopped once it started 10,000 years back. So, of course, the application of these mantras had to have some place. You cannot just repeat them for yourself in your Gurukula. So it has to be kind of open to people. People have to come. They come to the Vedas. They have something to achieve. They want to be part of it. They listen to these mantras the Brahmins are pronouncing. They're making oblation. Everything, the whole externalization happened in the time of the conventionalization of the truth. We started with symbolic age, golden Satya Yuga, yes, where the spirit was, kind of Sri Aurobindo says, brooded upon among men. Yes, it was there within them. And then there is this kind of creating the format, dharmic format, for what is right and what is wrong, where the narrowing down of the presence of the spiritual took place, that had to be somehow preserved, fixed in some form, ritualistic form, application form. It had to be embodied in first in the Vedas and then next in the temples. Temples came much later. From the Vedas. Yeah, before there was Svadhyaya, only you were the altar. You were invoking the gods to change your nature and grow in consciousness. Then it became the Vedi, involving other people externally. Very good example of this would be most probably Natya Shastra, if you know how it starts. The first drama was made for the gods. You know, the first drama of creation of the world was made for the gods. Gods were the audience. And then it changed from the vertical audience to the horizontal. Then the people started to come and to, you know, to face this knowledge, this treasure, this meaning of life, building the temples. That means culture, that means sculptures, architecture, painting, music. Everything started to develop on the ground of this idea of the sacrifice as charging our unregenerated, uncultivated nature by the spirit, cultivation of the spirit by the spirit of our nature. And that's why externalizing. And of course it is a very important period and very important time for creating the culture as we know it. But at the same time, forgetting the very spirit slowly, shifting away from the innermost use to the outer formation. Form substitutes the inner experience. Yeah. The Sri Aurobindo says cloth becomes more important than who is wearing it. So this is the way how it was inevitably coming to the Kali Yuga. And in Kali Yuga, of course, the language is changing, and the Gita is the beginning of Kali Yuga, as we know. And he reminds him about the ancient yoga, which is forgotten totally, karma yoga, and now he brings it back to Arjuna. So we see this kind of developmental paradigm, which is kind of amazing. And the first was Svadhyaya, and Svadhyaya still remains the most important, that you take the text of the Rishi, read to yourself. And when you read to yourself, your mind has to observe the flow of the text, and the experience is being created within you. You can feel the change of consciousness. And this is still, even in the ritualistic nature, even Sayana, who is the greatest ritualist of 14th century, he says that Svadhyaya is the major sacrifice. You don't need to do it externally. You have to take the text, read to yourself, understand it, and something will happen to you. And it is true. This is the change of consciousness. Rishi left for us the keys, the hymns, by which you can help yourself to rise in consciousness. And then, of course, there are other forms, external forms. There are more questions here, most probably.
Yeah, we have one from Ian Smith. Can you speak more about the methods of consecration?
Well, Gita gives very good, yes, you can follow it. This is, first of all, the action has to be done without the attachment to the fruit. That means psychological interest, egoistic interest in the result has to be removed. And then you will notice that nature is doing herself the whole work, and you will notice it with your unborn self. Your unborn self, spirit within you, Purusha, witness, will reveal itself if you do this way. So this is one way of consecrating. There is another way. Remember and offer, Mother says. Yes, remember. That means your origin. Remember who you are, and offer this to the divine. Whatever you do, are, eat, think, feel, become, everything has to be offered to the divine. And that offering will be, if it is taken, you will feel immediately the shift in consciousness. There are other ways of consecrating, more negative ways, kind of moving away from the ego sense, noticing all the forces which are entering and demanding their satisfaction in you, stepping back from your satisfaction of your senses and redirecting them towards the spirit and receiving only spiritual light and allowing that light through the senses to reach to the surface. There are other ways to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems that surrender, behind that is this constant aspiration. It is also an act of consecration. And as you're mentioning, also rejection of all that is lower, is ignorant, is avidya. So very nice. We also had, I typed in the answer, but just for the participants, we had someone asking if Vladimir's presentation could be made available. And so all of these videos are recorded and in our knowledge bank. You just go to lagrassecenter.com and click on Knowledge Bank, and we'll have it up there within 24 hours along with his slides. So I just wanted to mention that before the next question, which is from Alok. Why the Vedic period is termed as a symbolic age, how it is linked to subjective age as it is the same individual who sees both, ?
Well, the names were taken from, as you know, by Sri Aurobindo from the German scholar, yes. He says that there was certain intuition, but he developed it, symbolic, typal, because these are psychological changes, yeah. Symbolic in a sense that everything here in this world is a symbol of the spiritual presence of the divine. We are all symbolic presentations of the divine, all. Our bodies, our minds, our actions, they are symbolic representatives of the divine. And in a way, knowing it, that everything has a divine value, the whole nature is the divine manifestation, seeing it in that way, perceiving it, the sun, the wind, the rain, the dawn, the night, it creates totally new perception of things. Yes, everything is symbolically here, symbolically because it's not totally yet. It's in the making, in the process of becoming the divine. So that's why symbolically, but it is the divine. That's why symbolic age. Why subjective? Because truly speaking, that subjective age is the age where we individually, as Sri Krishna says, discover the divine in our heart. Now we don't need a proof of anyone telling us that the divine is, because I know my truth from myself. And that process takes time to arrive at the deepest true subjective knowledge. There will be several stages. Yes, first there will be false stage, false subjectivism, which is dictated by our desires, vital world, and so on. But slowly and gradually we arrive at pure subjectivity or connection to the divine in the individual framework. And that will open up again to the new Satya Yoga, to new symbolic age.
And then the final question by Carol. Can you help to understand why there has to be demons in the soul of man? What's the purpose of demons? I know.
Well, in the soul of man, this is something, when Sri Aurobindo says that but beautiful passage, when he says that the forces of darkness and light clash there in the battlefield for the soul as the costly prize, they want to get it for themselves. Can you imagine if the darker forces will get the divine precious soul here, the spark of the divine? They will continue to live for a while. They want to endure. They don't want to change. Actually, they want to change, but they don't know it on the surface. Inwardly, in the innermost being, these anti-divine forces, they know that they want to change, but they cannot do it otherwise but through the battle. So this is the shortcut for them. They want to fight the divine. So they go and fight, and by that the divine is winning, and they are released from their, ugly nature, their surface nature. And this happened many times in the stories of Mahabharata, when Krishna killed the demons and then the divine beings were released. And they said, thank you, we were waiting so long for you to stumble upon us and to release us from this curse of the distorted outer nature. So this has to be understood, that everything here is the divine. Only on the surface it may look like very opposite. And everything has its place and role to play in this economy of the divine manifestation. There's more to it, but I stop here.
Okay, and Ian is back with a follow-up question on your Swadhyaya. He's saying, much of the time I do not understand on the mental level what I'm reading, of Sri Aurobindo specifically. My question, is there a level at which the reading which I do is still entering in a significant way and doing the work?
Absolutely. Absolutely doing the work. There is no way that it would not do. Even if you don't understand, Mother says, she says, read anyhow. Somebody asked her, shall we read Savitri if you don't understand it? Yes, please read. Even if you don't understand, slowly read, because the words are powers of consciousness of the Rishi, or in this case of Sri Aurobindo, or the Rishi in the Veda, and they slowly build in you the very means of understanding. Even if you didn't have any understanding in any approach, by these words, by these luminous expressions of consciousness, you build the capacity within your being to open up to these meanings. So, yes. But you have to read it slowly and do not try to understand with the mind too much. Kind of go slow. If you don't understand, don't try to get there. Yes, let it be. Let that question stay with you. That question works. And it may stay forever, till the end of your life, but it will do something to you. It will bring many more meanings and significances to your life. Many more than you can see now.
It seems also that perhaps the intention behind why you read is always important. To be open to new learnings, to growth of consciousness, to truth. So the intention that you go in with, that you set before the Swadhyaya, is probably also equally important. So that is it with the questions, Vladimir, and really thank you for such a wonderful talk and such an important topic. And Selby, thank you for joining. We certainly look forward to your discussion and talk and sharing next week. And thank you, participants. We will be having this again on the Knowledge Bank shortly. So thank you. Thank you again, Vladimir. Selby, we'll see you next week.
See you, Selby.
Namaste.